Thank you, everybody, for coming to this historic meeting, a joint meeting between the Hagerstown City Council and the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County. We are very pleased to have everybody here today joining with us. I guess nobody needs any introductions. I don't know, Jeff, if there's any new business you wanted to
I
talk
just
about?
would open up and say thank you for the invite and a warm welcome. We know everybody and it seems we're all good friends, and to the folks in the audience and the gallery, thank you all for being here, and again, thanks for the warm welcome.
Okay, all right. Well, we have a couple of issues left over from the last meeting that we had over at your headquarters, and some new issues we wanted to start out with tonight too. The first thing I think we've all got in front of us the new automatic and mutual firefighting rescue and EMS agreement, mutual aid agreement, which I know has been worked on very diligently, and have to commend everybody who's put a lot of time into this. That is also piggybacks on one of the big issues that we have is on the tax differential in the fire and EMS, and that was something that we hope to lead off with tonight and discuss that, and then see where we've got a list of other items, see where we get to on the agendas list. Chief, you and Dave.
Good afternoon. The copy you have in front of you is one change, I believe, to the red on page 4 of 6 in your copy. You may remember as a joint group, you last saw this in the end of August at 100 West Washington Street. There were some questions raised about number 7 and the concerns that were raised by the Volunteer Fire Rescue Association. So Bruce Poole had submitted language that was called into question with the Mayor and Council meeting when we last saw this in the middle of October. So that language has been changed to what you see in red in front of you, which I believe is plain language that everybody should be comfortable with. I won't speak for Director Hayes. I'll allow him to speak, but from my chair, this is a good document. I would ask the Mayor and Council to give a consensus yes or no here today with the intent of moving it to your regular session for a vote. And I would respectfully ask the Board of County Commissioners to support this document as well for all the reasons that we discussed in August. We can revisit them if you'd like, but I'll turn the mic over to Director Hayes.
So I don't have a whole lot to add. I certainly would concur with the Chief's comments that it's a good document. I firmly believe that the language that we have in here relative to the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, and from my recollection, was one of the council's concerns that it was not clear and not clear in its intent. I think this hopefully meets what you would be looking for in that, and I'd strongly encourage you to move it forward with a recommendation for visit at an open session of each of your respective bodies for adoption. It's a good document. It addresses the right things for the right reasons, and it makes sure that we're always looking at the citizens first approach to deliver emergency services, regardless of political boundaries. So that's really all I've got to add to it, unless you've got questions.
Dave, that change, was it run by Mr. Poole?
I gave this copy to the association presidents, and Rick Blair and Rick Hiphill last week, and then we briefed this again at the ESAC, of which Rick Blair was at last week and expressed no concern. So I can't answer if it's been by, but the original document and the draft language that was in there, Commissioner, was by Bruce Poole, and he had submitted language, but it just wasn't quite, I guess, as concise as what we think we've got here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ESAC meetings I've been to, and I think Emily's been to a couple of them, there was a consensus there that they reviewed this a couple times, and they're in favor the way it's written, so that's all I can tell you from being on ESAC.
Well,
Yeah.
the sentence is much more clear.
Yeah.
You know, which is exactly what our concern was, so. for me.
Certainly.
Yeah, the whole document was very clear in its intent and direction, and that one sentence, it just sounded like something that was put in so somebody could litigate it, and it, you know, seriously. So now it's in plain English, which I think I prefer.
Can you define the term jurisdiction on item 2B?
You said 2D?
2B.
Yeah, so that's the first two host jurisdictions, so that would be the fire department that has that area respectively as far as the boundaries. And I want to make sure, you said D, right, Chris?
D as
Rob,
in
B
boy.
is-
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was D. We're in here.
At least 50% of a jurisdiction's firefighting capacity must remain within that jurisdiction when it is providing automatic aid.
Right. So in that case, I think you're gonna find that's more applicable to the city of Hagerstown. But when you look at a jurisdiction, the jurisdiction would be Washington County. Remember, this is between bodies of governance. So the city limits of Hagerstown and the resources that you own and control are in their entirety. And in Washington County whole, it would be the units or apparatus that are available countywide. So what I would say to that is that for 50% of the county's entire available force to be available or needed in Hagerstown, this mutual aid agreement will probably, Chief and I are probably going to say, we don't really care. We've got a big fire that a lot of people are likely to die in, and we're going to send whatever it takes to mitigate that emergency. But this is really, I think, meant, Kristen, probably to more be from the city outside, because there is a finite number of units that you have available, and we wouldn't want to pull all 5 engines of both ladder trucks to call in the county, again, unless we had just that particular call. But outside of that, the normal calls and normal things that we manage through, it's meant to make sure, and I won't speak for the chief, but from my perspective, it would be more relative within the city that there's a firefighting force still left here to
So-
take care of your primary responsibility.
So is this term jurisdiction in this specific bullet point talking about the city? Because when you look down the other sections in 2, it then uses jurisdiction in a different meaning.
But Kristen-
Automatic aid jurisdiction, the party whose geographic boundaries
No,
are
no,
outside
I disagree,
the
Chris.
FDHJ.
Party's Washington County.
So
So
that's where.
any Washington County unit, not just fair
But-
play or anything.
But it says right here, the first due host jurisdiction. When it says first due host jurisdiction, there are 20-some different first due jurisdictions.
Not if there's only 2 parties to this agreement, the city of Hagerstown and the county of Washington.
It
Then,
says in-
then the first due jurisdiction would either be a Washington County unit or a city of Hagerstown unit.
And the word jurisdiction is defined on page 1.
Yeah, I see that, but that's why I'm asking if 2B is intended to be used to mean the 2 parties here or not.
Council member, I don't know if this helps or not. The language actually was inserted by the city. And the reason it was inserted was to honor a decades-old agreement that existed with the 2 previous chiefs here, Chief Hallbaker and Chief Dietrich. And I believe that was at the direction of the then mayor and council to never strip more than 2 engines of a ladder without shift commander or fire chief permission. So the intent of that language is, it's not that we would ever say no, but realizing that the population density is here, the risk is here for multiple calls. We've never said no to an automatic aid request in the 5 years I've been here.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, that there is some agent agreement to that effect, but this doesn't say that. And so, you know, when you say 2 engines or 5 engines or some terminology, what you're saying is 50%. The only question that I have is when it talks about it down here as a first due host jurisdiction, I don't want this document to be construed to mean that because especially, and as it relates to the city is a dual entity operating within a single jurisdiction, meaning we have a number of independent volunteer companies that are operating in concert with a paid system in a single jurisdiction. And if you use the term jurisdiction here to apply to this specific geographic boundary, I don't want it to be construed that other independent companies can also say, okay, I see the term first due area here. Does that mean I get to make that decision for my independent jurisdiction as well? Because then each of the companies could view it that way and say, okay.
But those companies, I thought were made abundantly clear, and one of the big issues is these companies are not a party to this agreement.
It is, and I hear that, and that's understandable, but when you go back to the language we just talked about on page 4 of 6, and you see the iteration that inserts the County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association and its member companies will not be billed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that begs my question, when you go back and refer to jurisdictions, let's just use this example. Let's say that a particular company responds in a specific location because of the inability for whatever reason for another company to respond in an area, and they say, hey, look, we've been to that location, you know, we've been first on the call, so to speak, and provided that service first on the call, so to speak, you know, 8 times out of the last 10 in the last 3 months. And you go back and say, okay, well, you know, you're a single jurisdiction, you're part of that singular jurisdiction, so it really doesn't matter. And by the way, with this language in red here, you don't have that ability then to say, you know, at what point does that become a level of dependency where you can't seek any compensatory, you know, reimbursement or obligation for that? In other words, where's the protection between the entities to say you're gonna respond?
Would it help if there was just the jurisdiction definition? Because I think there's definitely a distinction between jurisdiction and first due host jurisdiction. There's definitely a distinction between those when you read those sentences. So when it's saying at least 50% of jurisdictions, it's not saying at least 50% of the first due host jurisdiction. That's not saying that. And that's
Page
where-
one, first paragraph, last sentence. The city and the county may sometimes be referred to in this agreement individually as a party or a jurisdiction and collectively as the parties or the jurisdiction.
As I mentioned.
So when you read 2D, I hear that. But 2D says the first due host jurisdiction, and first due
Well,
area has a
That's the county.
specific
By
connotation.
definition, that's the county.
Yeah, but that's the definition, is the first due host jurisdiction, and then it refers to other things. It said immediately along within the first due host
Okay,
jurisdiction.
so first due here is intended to mean 2 specific geographic areas, the city and the county, regardless of the fact that there are first due jurisdictions of more than 2 dozen, right, in this county. I just want to make sure that that's clear, that all the first due entities, the 20 couple out there that are outside of the city, understand now that they are one singular first due jurisdiction, right?
I think the way to look at that is more in line with authority having jurisdiction. And let me try to just, with fire departments anyhow, maybe create a similar acronym that gives it fire department having jurisdiction. So there's a difference between the two. So as an example, Funkstown, immediately southeast of Hagerstown, is the fire department having jurisdiction in that area through the authority vested by the authority having jurisdiction, which is the Washington County Board of County Commissioners. The same is true in Hagerstown. The mayor and council are the authority having jurisdiction. The fire chief or the Hagerstown Fire Department operationally are the fire department having jurisdiction. So maybe the FDHJ is better delineated, but it gets into the whole thing. There's EMS there too. So I think that's where the word host became the word of choice, and host was supposed to be non-specific fire EMS. If that is any help in that.
Bruce Poole review this whole thing?
Yes.
He reviewed it, and Lou says it's fine, Kirk's looking at it, who am I to to challenge it.
That's
you
what I'm
know.
gonna put my trust in, Lord.
Yeah, I'm good.
And the, you
And
know,
the city
director
plans
has
will
Assuming
to
our
be
city attorney, I'm not the city attorney, but I'm assuming the city attorney.
He has.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason spent a lot of time with.
So we got attorneys everywhere sanctioning this thing, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
So, could we move this to our council regular agenda for the 26th meeting?
We'll have a motion for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, the next item, same subject on fire. Wanted to discuss an issue that's been coming up over and over and over again on the tax differential, and what can be done to try to figure this out once and for all, what we need to do. And is there any interest in putting together a meeting or series of meetings with our fire professional leaders over here and a couple of members of the council and a couple of members of the commissioners to try to ferret through this thing and figure out what needs to be done to achieve some kind of equity. Right now, I think we are all of the opinion, and the citizens of the city are all of the opinion, I think that there's some inequities in the tax differential. And why it was defined that way and why it's been that way for so long, we don't know, and we can't figure it out. So,
If I could just say this, there was, and Kristen will appreciate this and agree with me, for years, when we go to the state of the city, there would be two questions, and you could count on that was always being asked. One was, we're gonna have a baseball team, all right? But the other one was, when are you guys gonna start talking about consolidation of services? And we got asked that question over and over again, and people would toy with this and that. And I think they started to stop asking that question when I finally spoke up and said, well, yeah, you want to talk about consolidation of services, then let's really talk about it, real consolidation of services, instead of toying around with a couple people here and a couple people there. Let's talk about public safety. Let's talk about consolidating the fire departments and the police departments into a county-wide units. And boy, everybody got quiet real fast. And those questions stopped being asked, and I haven't heard that question in quite a while. The reason I bring it up is because when we talk about the differential, the tax differential, I would invite the county to look at that issue and say, geez, if we took over fire and police emergency services for the entire county, including the city of Hagerstown, how much would it cost us? Because until you get to that type of thinking, because let's face it, this whole tax differential issue is based upon, unless I'm wrong, basically two things that we are saying are unfair, and that's contributions towards fire and rescue and police, and especially fire. And the county has the same responsibility clearly to all of its citizens, including the city residents, and I don't think there's anybody who believes a metropolitan area of this size could ever be adequately serviced by a volunteer force or by a professional force of less magnitude than we have. So until the county starts figuring out what it really cost in dollars and cents if we were to consolidate, nobody can really understand what the fair side is. I mean, we can talk about formulas all day long, but unless somebody tell me I'm wrong, the real lack in this formula is fire and police, and especially fire. And until that gets resolved, you can have every formula in the world. And as I say, maybe we shouldn't be expecting 100% refund, but we should be at least expecting that our citizens would get the same quality of treatment paid for by the county that is required, and how much would that cost if we consolidate? And that's where I would start. And then, you know, clearly, I don't know if anybody has a political wherewithal to really consider those types of consolidations, but it's a good place to start to try to figure out what's going on with the differential and the issues that we have.
I think we have a lot of information now on where the tax differential came from. I don't have it with me, but it was provided. I just think it would be a good starting point to sit down and see where the inequities are. If we keep talking about it, but there's no real action. So like Austin said, maybe, you know, Director Hayes is here, Chief Lohr, we're all here. Maybe we can start having some serious conversations on where the inequity is and how we can fix it. I mean, I think we just need a plan of action. I don't think that's really asking too much, to start looking into it. And I know, just for the record, I have no intention of consolidating services. I just felt the need to say that because I'm sure there's lots of people having heart attacks out there right now watching this meeting. So just to make that very clear. But I do think that we should, you know, sit down and figure out. We haven't reviewed it in what, 10 years, right? Is that 10, 11 years? And it's, you know, a lot has changed in 10 and
Was that
11 years.
2009 or 10 when the commissioners voted that, you're talking about the 12.5 cent,
Between 6 and
6 and 10?
Okay. I mean,
Well,
lots
I wouldn't be
changed in
opposed
9
to
years.
sitting down and discussing it, staff, or
But as long as we
whatever
can sit
level.
down and discuss it and have a date in mind, you know, our budgets are going to, you know, we're gonna be talking about budget soon, so as long as it doesn't keep getting kicked down the road, you know, that,
established all the parameters for that differential.
Kristen, seriously?
I'm voting against it.
And when you talk about the timing though, seriously, if you're gonna do this, given the fact that we're just a little over a year to another election,
That too.
if there's a hope of actually getting it done, you know, as soon as an election takes place and there's new people and you start all over again. So I would suggest getting on it right away.
Yeah, and we don't want to keep kicking it into the next
Right,
election
exactly.
cycle and the next election cycle.
Because then these guys will.
It's only
Yeah.
fair to our
No, no.
citizens, and with due respect, you guys have to protect the county taxpayers, but my job as an elected official in the city of Hagerstown is to have the backs of our taxpayers. So I think, you know, we need to look at what's fair and what's fair.
And the thing is, the city is also part of the county, so I agree. I mean, when I'm looking at the taxpayer, I'm not just looking at outside the city, we should be looking at everybody.
Yes.
And we should set a time frame to get this done, but I think it's more than just having fire and rescue there. I think we should both have, you know, our directors of finance and CFOs there, because there's other things that should be involved, but having a committee to sit down on a somewhat regular basis to get this updated makes sense. But I would also put into it, I think that if we say it's a 10-year time frame that we set there, that this has to be done in 10 years again, so that it doesn't become this huge problem. And next thing you know, it's 13 years down the road, and people are just arguing about it.
Sustainability.
And we had already met once, myself, Rob, Sarah, and Michelle, just to go over, to at least bring me up to speed on the guts of what this is. So to expand that, we would certainly be able to expand that conversation. Because there is more that goes into it than just a determination of a split. There is a method to the madness. And the other thing, several jurisdictions, the counties will report every year as to what the tax have an actual presentation as to what the tax differential is. I don't think we've had one of those in quite a while before us. So that would be another, instead of reviewing this every 10 years, I actually think it's something we need to review every budget cycle. But that can be something that can be determined when we all get together.
Would it be unreasonable to ask that a meeting like this and some sort of solution be available by the 1st of January? I mean,
That's pretty.
I think we can at least start a meeting, because that is going into a budget cycle.
Yeah, but I don't think we can have a solution by the 1st of January.
And
I'd work fast.
may I suggest that this needs to be, as Court said, staff-driven? I think historically, if it's driven by the elected officials, it's dead on arrival. I mean, we've tried that over and over and over again. But when I hear about the staff, the department heads being finance, fire, and those types of folks, that may be much more, at least to lay the groundwork. Because otherwise, all we're doing is talking to each other and not really moving.
That's a good point. We're gonna have to refer back to staff for the data. We don't do that every day. So I think that's an excellent idea to get the staff together, put something together so then we can start having our talks with staff providing us.
But should there be elected officials at these initial meetings, 2 and 2? I mean,
I
would
don't wanna
recommend-
be there. I'd like staff to get the information together for us out there, then
Well, it
they
sounds
bring
like
that
that
to
meeting's
us.
already taken place, right?
Well, just the initial one.
Just, that
Initial
was
meeting?
with staff, yeah, but that's,
Kinda
I
like
know, I don't know anything about it.
101
That's the
session.
first I've heard of that
Well, I'm
meeting.
nosy, I don't mind attending, because I like to know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I don't remember when the meeting took place, and I don't have a report from that meeting, so, I
I
think
just-
you're up in the air on that. What
If
was in the
Kristen
meeting?
and Emily wanna
When
do
was
it.
Actually, the meeting was, that meeting was actually requested by me, I believe, just as a way to understand what actually it was all about. I've gotten, I had information from MML, I'd read the Anne Arundel model, and now it was just a time that we needed to sit down and get an understanding, from the county's perspective, as to how the tax differential worked. There was no decisions made as to, well, this needs to change, this needs to change. This was more of a, like I said, a tax differential 101 for the new guy, so.
Gotcha.
My comment, this is an issue that I've heard talked about in my 3-4 years on the commission. Maybe to Councilwoman McIntyre's point, maybe if we can't set a deadline of when we'll have a solution, can we maybe direct staff, let's have that next initial meeting within the next 2 weeks so we can get something moving at least? Would that be helpful? And I like the idea of having, if elected officials want to join, let these be public meetings if they need to be. So whoever wants to attend, you don't have to worry about a quorum because it would be made public.
I think public meetings are a very great idea on this topic, because I think this is one of these things that the citizens have no idea about, which allows us to be stagnant, maybe, for lack of a better way to put it. I think, but I think this is a very, very important topic that if brought to people's attention, there would be more buzz behind it.
So in order
Honestly.
to drive this to some sort of completion, then should we can't come up with a date we're going to have a solution, but should we come up with a date that our respective staffs will do a presentation of where they're at on this subject, what's been deliberated, and what the questions are? Maybe there are questions they need to refer back to the elected bodies for
When's our
guidance.
next quarterly meeting?
Yeah,
Or
when's our next joint meeting?
The February.
Well, that would be
Well, that's-
perfect. Well, and again, my concern is budget season,
Well,
the
that's the
budget
thing.
cycle,
We need to
so
have-
Well, I mean, it may be unrealistic to get this accomplished for
at
this
least the
budget
conversations
cycle.
can be started.
You
that's
can
all.
start the conversation, we can have a follow-up meeting in 90 days, and that allows the conversation to get started, but understand that there's a lot of uncertainty on the county's perspective in terms of how it's going to respond to the growing budgetary challenges that it sees for fire and rescue services. I mean, those discussions are ongoing, but quite frankly, a solution has not yet been arrived at, which would be impacted by these discussions.
Kirk, is this anything that would require General Assembly support? Is this enabling legislation as it was originally written? What, is it our decision to make those changes?
I don't think it will require General Assembly input. There is provisions as to how the tax differential is determined. Obviously, we'll have to look at that with Sarah as we go through these conversations, so that everybody has a shared understanding of what goes into those figures.
Well, when you mention, you have to weigh it as it relates to ongoing and increasing county obligations associated with fire and rescue and public safety in general, I just point out a couple of pretty basic facts. Out of 157 municipalities in the state of Maryland, there are four left that have paid fire service: Salisbury, Annapolis, Cumberland, and Hagerstown. All three of those other municipalities in this state Salisbury, Annapolis, and Cumberland receive some type of compensation, whether it's differential, deferment, or even a stipend, in Salisbury's case, from the county for providing that paid service. Right now, City of Hagerstown, and it's growing each year, we contribute, the city taxpayer, about 33% of every tax dollar that we collect in the City of Hagerstown goes to fire and rescue. In the county, depending on the year, it's between 4% and 7%. So just to give you an idea right now, I don't see this playing out, and we can talk about, including in the differential, and I think that's the appropriate way to go. But the reality is, at the end of the day, at some point, there's going to be a breaking point on this issue. And I think that you'll find other municipalities that once provided municipal paid fire service, encountered that same thing at different points in time. And I think we'll get there, if we do something now or we sit and wait on it to happen later, it's going to happen because, the City of Hagerstown can't take in, it just can't take in $29 million in property tax every year and continue to watch an item like that, go from $7 to $8 to $9 million, of that total indefinitely, especially as it relates to the reduction, frankly, in the volunteer side of that, including the fact that, as I point out often, that the volunteer companies that happen to exist within the City of Hagerstown simply do not receive the same level of compensation, are simply not eligible for the same funding opportunities that exist for the other volunteer companies in the county, simply because the city picks up a portion of that difference as part of that $9 million that the city taxpayer contributes to that system. I mean, those are the numbers. I mean, they just are what they are.
I appreciate those numbers, Chris. I think that does help put some things into perspective, but the obligations of the county, while it does include fire and rescue, 50% of our operating budget goes to the Board of Education. So just understand, we have those large percentages that we have to keep in compliance to as we're required by state law. So just be mindful of that, and I'm sure you are from your time on the commission.
Yeah.
Okay, so then,
But only one answer can I give to that. People live in the city are paying the same tax for that Board of Education that people in the county were. The people in the county were paying the same support for fire in the city that city residents are paying, then I buy that argument. But we're bearing the brunt of the fire services. The county residents are not bearing the brunt of the Board of Education. The entire county is, not just those outside of the municipalities. Those outside of the municipalities, we're being treated different on fire.
I thought that was all part of the differential. I thought we gave
But
credit.
that's
do.
the problem,
You do.
Terry. It is, but the problem is
For
the
everything but
differential.
fire.
It's,
Okay, so
when it
what
comes
we
to
need
fire,
do
it's
is
a
get this
joke.
over with. So what we need to do is we need to get our staff, possibly, to provide all of the information and all of the worksheets that they used during the last differential, and let's sit down and let's find out if there are inaccuracies. If there are, then we can address them. We just have to
Yeah, I
beat
think
this
so.
up.
No, I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Well, I think that's what needs to happen, is we
I
have
totally
this
agree.
meeting, and if it starts with staff, and eventually becomes a elected and staff meeting,
then
I
with the
think that
public,
makes
I think
sense.
that's,
So,
And we have to make it a priority, we have
because
to
the
be
staff's
intentional
gonna,
about it.
they're gonna
Oh,
come
you
back
have to be
and they
intentional.
need
Just said 90
direction
days,
from the
I'll have a
elected
meeting
officials.
every 90 days.
Like that.
Yeah.
Get
Sounds
the
good.
information together. We can sit here and talk all day
Right.
long. but
Yeah.
we
It's
know-
Yeah, I think
So-
we got a little summary going on here, if you would.
Yeah, so, I think what we need to do is let staff get together and start this.
Soon.
Yeah, very soon. And who, I don't know, for leadership, who's gonna,
Well, we'll work through our intro.
our interim. Okay, so we'll take that, start these meetings, and then, I think, let staff start meeting in private, and then when they get to a point where they need direction from the elected officials or are ready to present some findings or present some recommendations, then we'll do a public meeting, but not televise the ongoing
Let the staff
deliberations.
work amongst each other, then they bring information, and we can meet in public for the discussion.
You'll do. You may
Instead
go
of just saying soon, can we define that soon and say that staff will meet within 3 weeks?
Oh, I'll have it before that.
Well, yeah, I'd like for that, but
I'm
just,
We'll have it before
I think
Thanksgiving.
our staff.
we might have an
our
answer,
staff should work
we might have an answer
together.
for
I
you
understand
tomorrow.
busy our staff. They don't need to be.
Changes, it does.
More
Yeah.
meetings, you know, they've got enough going on.
No, that's what I'm saying, I just
Okay,
set a time.
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Then, going forward, there's an item from the last meeting that we had on the tax sale of blighted properties. And we wanted to pick up the discussion on that.
Good afternoon. Wanted to clarify the properties that we were targeting for a tax sale program. The tax sale problem properties that we were looking at, it's a very select list of properties. I think it's approximately 50 or 60 that enter into that no bid tax sale problem year after year. And we have some slides here just to refresh our memories on that presentation. And also to clarify, it's not really associated with any of the city's vacant licensing program or vacant structure lists in general. Most of these properties, aside from maybe a very unique case, they've been to tax sale for a decade or more at times, delinquent on their taxes for a decade or more at times. They've essentially been abandoned. There's no one caring for the property. Most of the time our code staff is the one who's mowing the grass or clearing the weeds. And what we are at this point looking to do, we're finalizing the process and program guidelines with the city attorney. That should be in front of the mayor and city council within the coming weeks. And once that is then approved by the council, after receiving their feedback, we would look at a few properties to then begin this program on a pilot basis. And once again, to go through a few quick slides to refresh our memories. And I had updated some numbers on these slides to be more accurate. Sometimes what happens is properties that do go to tax sale receive bids, but they then are stuck out of the tax sale for up to 2 years for that potential tax sale bidder to acquire that property for foreclosure. So that sometimes resets the cycle. But what we are showing here is when the property first became delinquent with their tax payments, and then also it shows when they were first vacant based upon our records.
But these parcels are not in foreclosure. They
Yes.
are not in any type of sale activity. They are back at the city as a city responsibility for abatements. They're basically zombie properties. right?
Correct, and even in our guideline document, we say no property will be eligible if it is subject to foreclosure or if it is in a foreclosure process or under contract.
You know, I think it's sorry, Austin. I think it's a good idea, but I think the first presentation was pretty flawed. I think that, I went back to my office and 2 of those properties were on those slides were mine and in my portfolio, which meant that the bank was gonna pay the taxes. They're Freddie Mac. So I think my only concern will be, we gotta be absolutely sure. These things will sit around for 3 years sometimes.
We're unaware of the previous properties that were presented on those slides that were.
Yeah, and I know that it's hard to figure it out.
If we can follow up which properties those were, we'll make sure we're
We
on top
did.
of that.
well, they're sold now, so.
Yeah, we did, and those properties were actually on the vacant registration list as being delinquent. Because we went back and I received the 2 addresses
Right.
that were an issue. We went back and looked, they were not on,
Yeah,
we showed them as having taxes paid. They were not on our chronic tax.
Okay, well,
delinquency
yeah, I just
list.
wanted to make sure we're not
So
paying
the-
off,
I
we're not
think we were
forgiving taxes and
We were
the banks
mixing
don't pay them anyway.
definitions last time, which is why we want to do this to make it clear.
Gotcha. Okay, it makes sense, yeah.
So these are 5 potential properties that we would look at to begin this program on a pilot basis. And once again, the methodology that the city is exploring is soliciting some type of new ownership on the front end looking for an experienced developer, likely through a nonprofit type of initiative. That's based upon the state of Maryland legislation for these types of issues. This has been an issue across the state as the General Assembly has passed multiple rounds of legislation in the recent years for this particular type of problem.
On this particular property, why couldn't the city buy it?
Well, the goal is we actually would be acquiring it through foreclosure. We do not want to continue to own it then because we're not going to.
Buy and sell.
That's exactly the methodology that we're looking at. We would tax sale foreclose. On the front end, that we'd find someone who would like to possibly rehab it,
So
such
you would need us
as.
to help you with $3,606
Correct.
to acquire that property.
That's correct. You need to waive that.
Right.
Because essentially, the city is waiving all of their taxes as well.
We could deduct that from the differential.
Terry.
No, hey,
You're sitting
no.
awful close to me.
I know, he's like in between us.
Kristen,
Is there a,
Is that a motion?
Terry made a motion.
Commissioner Wagner brought up, trying to find out, you know, if these properties are in a situation where the bank is going to continue to pay the property taxes, what's the best way to figure that out?
These haven't had property tax paid on them since 2008.
Okay. So
And
there's-
we have a way of knowing that through the state and also through our local system.
Okay.
And is the state gonna waive their small amounts?
We don't know if that's a possibility, but I think the city, our recommendation of the mayor and council is we would eat that cost because we'll be paying our city attorney for foreclosure costs if we get to that step. So luckily, the state funding is very trivial.
Exactly.
And once again, here's two properties that were not on the original presentation, just noting the dates, tax delinquency since 2011, vacant since 2010. Another one vacant since 2010 and also tax delinquent since 2010.
And that $34,000 tax, that's taxes plus fees and penalties, right?
Correct.
And abatements.
Property taxes,
Abatements.
abatements, and any other city liens.
No, I guess my thought was, why is it so high? I was just
Yeah.
clarifying.
Yeah.
We cut the grass, we remove the trash, and we do that probably
Shovel of snow.
at least once or twice a
Get
month.
that, we wouldn't have to worry about it.
And once again, we've had conversations with nonprofit organizations. These properties have been sitting vacant, doing no one any good for years. And we've actually had some success with flipping previous city-owned properties to nonprofits, and they've occupied them with families that are paying rent. They're back on the tax rolls.
You're looking for 100% waiver, is that what you're looking for?
That would be the request.
What's the total amount? Do you have the total dollars that you would need from the
That-
county?
That would depend. I mean, we will officially work with the city council on which properties would be run through the cycle, and then we would have the total amount at that time.
So you could give us a total amount that you would be requesting at a specific time? And then
Correct.
you could give us a total amount for all properties?
I would say a total amount at a specific time.
Okay, but could we get both?
Yes.
Well, I think that you'd have to set up some parameters at some point to say, hey, look, once a property hits 5 years, let's just use that, you know, timeframe. Once it hits 5 years, then you go into that sort of waiver process where we would come to you each year with that list. And so, but I estimate the initial impact, these 50 properties, would be about $150,000 of impact to the county. And then going forward, it might be, you know, $10,000 a year that you might have happen. I like to put these into dollars and cents, you know, because, you know, that $150,000 to the average county tax penny to the average taxpayer equals about $9, so a total of about $9. And I like to then compare that, because all of us drive around, we can see some of these, and we say, look, if you told me that you were gonna need $9 from me one time to turn these properties, you know, from their current condition, I mean, I would say, where do I sign up? You know, where do I hand you my $10 bill so I don't have to see these anymore so that we can get them? Because,
How many properties are on the list?
well, he said about 50. What I'm saying is, if you set a time frame, then the next year might be 7, and the year after that might be 5. And I think that's
I
what will
personally
happen.
would be 100% for it as a county commissioner, not just me. As long as we had a system and as long as, yeah, you gotta get rid of these things, they're just blighting the whole town and everything else. And as long as they did, a good title search, make sure we're not paying taxes for the bank, I'd be happy.
That's the key,
Yeah,
Sarah,
yeah,
Sarah.
the research.
because we all are in agreement they're a blight.
Yeah, they're just dragging the neighborhood down,
Anybody else paying taxes?
and you end up with people breaking in and selling
When
drugs.
they sit there empty, the roof leaks.
Forgive the
But it just creates some more danger, no one will ever borrow the
Right.
money to put
And see,
into it.
like that one's occupied next door, it's a duplex.
And the big
So,
thing is what we
you
do,
know,
is
so
we have to
the
think
other
of this
side
as a
of the
positive.
duplex
Yes,
is-
we're forgiving on this one $6,000 in taxes, but they haven't been paying it anyway, and if it gets back on there, we're not losing, exactly, we're not losing it. If it
And
gets
it's
back
really
on the
been-
tax roll, now
Well,
we're
you're-
making money.
You're losing it on the 10 houses that are sitting around it.
Right.
I mean, that's where you're losing it,
That's what I'm
because
saying. This
those
is
houses
a-
are just going
You
down.
you get rid of this six, and then all of a sudden, the six becomes a positive, and the ones around it become a positive.
And I don't think, and I know, I appreciate staff, you know, indicating the nonprofit, and I think frankly, that's been brought up as being sort of the end receiver, because we feel like that's the most, you know, solid lead that we've had in wanting to do that. I would be perfectly happy, and I know we talked about it at the meeting we were at, you know, where I know that the chamber president appeared to have some interest in that, and I think we should explore if there are, you know, for-profit or marketable entrepreneurial entities out there that would also want to be a third-party, you know, receiving
I 100% know there are,
entity
so
for
if we had
that.
the first meeting, I had people call me and ask me about it. You know,
And I think we
saying,
should
hey,
explore
they-
that.
They'd be interested in buying these buildings, but they're not going to, because I owe $40,000 in back taxes
Right.
on a $100,000 house.
Yeah, I think they would flip overnight.
Yeah.
So why would the city only include their tax portion? Sure. You could forgive, because you're not gonna give it back anyhow. So if you were to forgive all of your fines, fees, and whatever
We
those
could.
other added costs are, if you would forgive those, we could possibly still sell the property for what's owed for taxes. Just a thought.
The city could do that. You're completely correct. And we could eat that
Because you're gonna
$3,000
forgive
from the
all that
county and,
anyhow.
and pay it and
A
and
concern
be the
there would-
responsible party.
My concern there would be if the owner of that particular parcel would still be around, then they could go ahead and pay the taxes on it, get it out of tax sale, hold it for 2 years. We've given them, say, $25,000 credit to what they would have to pay, and then still not do anything with it, and we're stuck for another 2 years.
Stuck with a
blight.
blighted property still.
Yeah, we're stuck with blight. This is a way where, one, we stay out of the real estate business. Two, we already have a predetermined interest in who would want this particular property, and we can just move it. And state law in the last couple of years has given us a lot more flexibility in being able to do that than what we had 3-4 years ago. So that's why we're really motivated to do this, because now we have a direct channel and a guidelines that we can follow, that we can get rid of
I
these.
guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is, if we forgive the taxes owed to the county, you can move it. If we don't forgive the taxes, or you don't have to go through a tax sale. So if we don't forgive the taxes, then you have to take it through the tax sale. I don't understand.
No. If we forget, right now, if we
If you-
take this.
If you don't have to take this through the tax sale now, why do you have to take it through a tax sale if we forgive the taxes?
Because we still have to claim this property. We would still have to have a way to claim this property through a transfer. And right now, we would do it through, what Todd
Tax sale.
called an over-the-counter tax sale transaction.
We would essentially act as a tax sale bidder and.
Right.
And,
City buy it.
correct.
Right. So at some
And
point,
then
we
you're gonna sit
will,
on it for 2 years.
no, we're not, no.
So you won't have to.
State law says we do not have to.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a new piece of legislation. Before, yes, we would have, don't want to do that.
It's a way they can get clear title to it.
Right.
Well, I
Still don't understand.
and my thought is, I think this is an amazing program, something we should definitely look forward. I don't know if we should say we do all 50 properties the first year,
Oh, no.
you know?
Our recommendation is we're looking at 3 to 5 properties the first go-around, because this is a new program, it's very
Exactly.
unique, so I think we are going to learn some things about the process as we do it the first
And
time.
then-
And then we can redefine.
And then I just, the clarification, I know that we talked about it the last time, but we're gonna make sure that it is, I don't know what the terminology, but it cannot go back to that individual or anybody related to that individual as much as we legally can.
Correct.
I would be totally on board, so I'm like one vote. It sounds like court is.
Yeah,
But
well,
I wouldn't want to do them all at once, and I don't think that, you couldn't do them all.
we are
at once.
consensus, we
Taking
will vote
steps,
today, but I think you got consensus that we are gonna cooperate
We
with
just want
that.
to keep moving.
So
Yeah.
put it in writing, get it to us, and
Yes.
then get the 3 to 5 picked out, brief us, and we'll go from there.
We gotta get these
All I
properties
can.
back on the
Commissioners are on this, you gotta do
non-blighted
all you
side.
can now.
Okay.
Okay.
Up to that.
And so move on then. The next topic was water and sewer issues that have come up a number of times. Approval of city service outside the MRGA boundary and how we handle that. We've got some issues on the table right now with a developer that wants to do some development up north of the airport, and we wanted to have a little discussion about that. How can we go about compromising and taking care of, keeping development going forward without overextending our water and sewer resources?
Just let me tell you, I guess I'll go ahead and tell you where we're at with that. We did present several text amendments to the water sewer comp plan for the county that appear to be favorable to everybody in first review. One of the biggest issues we have, and I think we stated this the last time, is in areas where there may be infrastructure for connection to the water service of the city. Based upon the location and the capacity, it becomes a difficult decision whether we want to allow that allocation in the UGA versus maintaining that allocation for within city boundaries or within the MRGA. The discussions that staff have been moving towards a redesignation of those areas that fit that actual scenario, to where the health department will look at that favorably for the ability for that parcel to use a well. Right now, we get turned away from development if we get turned away from the health department for drilling of wells in areas outside the MRGA where there is city infrastructure.
Not we, the developer does.
The developer does. But they won't even consider that. So then that comes back on us as, well, we need the city to provide water. And now that becomes a dilemma for us, because we want to make sure we have capacity, and we want to make sure that we have development within the city boundaries, within the MRGA, versus that in the UGA. So that's where we're at with that discussion. We've made very good progress, and I believe it'll be to the commissioners fairly soon. I don't see anybody from county planning here, for you to look at those recommendations. And if that's the case, that takes a lot of takes some of the strain off the city's water service to be able to have the option of wells being drilled. So, Nancy, do you have anything to add to that? Nancy Hosserath, our utilities director, is back here.
The only thing I would add is that we are also working on the Consolidated General Service Agreement on the sewer side. Myself, along with our legal staff, is working with the county on Hawkinsville Superstation and that sort of thing. So, we're also working through that, which, ties into the water and sewer plan as well.
And I think the other issue there is the actual boundaries. Like if we're going to push, if we're going to say, we fully support connection, whatever connection we want to that pipe up north of the airport, we need to contract the boundaries someplace else. And how do we determine where that is?
Yes, there needs to be a balance, that's absolutely correct. Ed Norman of our staff, they've recently completed a map, if you will, of the service area in the MRGA, as I'm going to say one of the first steps in saying, okay, the MRGA is our boundary, and to start looking at where the UGA and the MRGA, where things get collapsed, where they get expanded, and that sort of thing. City and county actually working together on what is referred to as the priority list. Which parcels, what do we see most likely developing? Where can we pull things in? Where do we need to, if you will, push things out? So that priority list is being worked on. It's a joint effort.
Is that something that we need to, or is there any kind of time frame where we could see a recommendation of what the boundaries might look like, or 2 or 3 different alternatives?
City and county staff are meeting every 2 to 3 weeks. We have a meeting scheduled again this week to continue that discussion. It would be our hope that sooner than later, I would say within the, next, I would say month or 2. It's a tough, it's tough to identify your number 1 priorities, your number 2 priorities. It's kind of looking into a crystal ball a little bit. So I know county staff is working very diligently on that priority list, and that's always one of the major points of discussion whenever we get together, is we really need to identify this so we can kind of do that balance of where we expand and where we contract. But I would say sooner than later. We meet on average every 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, because it would be nice if we had, like, knowing that we have this demand for the airport development park and demand up north, it'd be nice to see 2 or 3 different alternatives, like, what the boundaries could look like, that then we could all have input into as to what looks like it makes sense from a overall growth direction perspective.
I met with my staff last week. I reviewed the mapping, the diagram that was prepared. I requested my staff to go back and put the 3, I'm going to call them enterprise zone areas, the airport, Hopewell, and Friendship. To make sure we identified those because they were already priority areas for the county. As soon as that's done, they're going to get with Kathy on our staff, and then we'll present that to the county, and hopefully at that point, the county will have their priority list ready, and maybe there will be 2 or 3 versions of that. I don't know, we haven't seen that yet. But it is a priority for both utility staff as well as, planning staff. And I know that's true on the county side as well, because every time we get together, it's both utilities and planning.
And as Scott was saying, that one of the things that's really driving this is the state's intractability on whether we can actually drill a well. If there's a pipe there, there may not be anything in it, but we can't drill a well because there's a pipe there.
Yeah, but there's a perception if there's a pipe, there's water.
Right. Is there anything we can do pushback-wise with the state on any, or is that just a lost cause, trying to fight that? Can't fight City Hall?
Delegate Quarterman's aware of it. We've spoken to the delegate about it, but also in the talks between the city and the county. The change in that designation of where water is not available would help tremendously, and that's part of the continuing discussions.
Okay, all right. That pretty much covers some of our high-level topics. I'd like to turn it over to the commissioners for any topics. And I just see the mayor came in. Would you like to?
I'll be here, you do a fine job.
Oh, okay.
Austin, I have nothing at this moment. Any of the commissioners have anything?
We started meeting time today, don't we?
Yeah, 3:30, so.
Do you think this is it?
Yeah, I did.
We'll get together on arranging some of these meetings that we were talking about.
Kurt and I figure it out, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Do it right tomorrow or
Sure.
whatever, okay. Anything else from us?
Can I take a moment
Sure.
of personal privilege? This isn't really something that has to do with the city of Hagerstown, because we don't have a say in it, but you guys as county commissioners do. So as someone who's on the senior policy opioid group, and as your constituent, I would just really like to ask for your support of the crisis center. the senior policy group and the health department got a grant to have a crisis center at Behavioral Health Center. There's a meeting about it next week. I'm hearing rumblings that there may be some pushback because of services in that area, which is totally ridiculous because they've provided services for years in that exact location. They served over 300 people until they ceased operations there. So it's nothing new, and it's really a huge win for our community. It's a huge win for emergency services. It's going to provide opportunities for people who need help. So I just would like to ask for your support when they come to you. It's a very, very, very positive thing for our community. So,
I'll take that under advisement.
thank you.
Well, thank you very much for today. I think it's been a very positive meeting. I think we've worked through a lot of issues and have a lot of deliverables for staff to go forth and deliberate and come back and give us some presentations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huh?
Good luck. Are you ready to like hold, buckle in?